Widowmaker's up in a tree. How can directional felling help you to be able to reduce those situations, those chances of struck bys? Struck by situations are the #1 injury when it comes to chainsaw operation around trees. Hangers, broken limbs that are hanging, different branches it can pass. How can directional felling help minimize those conditions? How does it make it safer as you fell trees? And join us for Thursday night saws, discussion on all things saws on Tim Ard's YouTube channel. Directional felling is utilizing sights on the chainsaw and information taken to be able to direct the tree away from objects or situations that could dislodge limbs or hang up or cause breakage of the tops. All of that's done by putting together a plan and then utilizing a hinge and notch to be able to keep that tree in the direction that we need it to go. That's the important part of directional felling. Directional felling is really good information taken to be able to put that tree where you need it to go. It's that plan of looking side to side and long enough to be able to clear the trees and branches that could be broken to cause that struck by situation. First planning and making sure that the width and the length of that tree can fit in the spot that we need to go without bending over or bending back or breaking off limbs or branches or tops that could cause those struck by situations. Several years ago I had the opportunity to work with a gentleman with the U.S. Forest Service. His name was Penn Peters. Penn was putting together a presentation, or really a study, on what caused most of the struck by injuries. And he worked for several months putting together a computer composite that would take the information and show how the different incidents happen. Could you really overcome side lean and be able to miss brushing a canopy with another tree by using a good information process, a good planning process? And so I had the opportunity to go up. We went to Parsons, West Virginia, to the U.S. Forest Service experimental forest, and we put together several tree marks, and he took trajectories on these, and we looked to see what kind of limits we had on being able to directionally fell those trees, make sure that we put them in the place we wanted them, but also to keep them from brushing other tops and limbs that would break and come back towards the operator. The object of the test or study that Penn Peters was doing was to take and plan the tree, see how much total side weight lean that it had, and then also looking at the total extension of the limbs coming off the canopy, the crown, and trying to calculate those to minimize the amount of hit or resistance against the other standing trees. Because it seemed like most of the struck bys happen when a limb would pass another limb, it would bend it back, break it off, whether green or dead, and end up throwing it back towards the stump or towards the operator's position. And I've seen situations to where, especially in dead tops, that you would see the tree hit the ground and limbs would go flying sideways for several yards, 50 yards in some cases, and it ends up same situation. They could come back towards the operator, or it could be some type of object or person that might be along the sides of that pattern. And so what happens is that those struck bys take place. So being able to calculate those, taking and looking at what kind of clearance that you have to be able to miss those situations with the top of the tree or the limb of the tree, to reduce those struck by potentials. So we took and measured the trees from a standpoint of the width of the canopy, looked at some locations between other trees that were standing, calculate the best position. And what Penn found is that if you could keep about 10% of the canopy of the tree that you were passing with the tree you were cutting, about 10% into it, that you reduced the chances of those limbs bending, breaking, and throwing back towards the operator greatly. So basically, like I said to him, I said, you know, the objective then is to more or less, if you had two trees that were 20 feet apart, and you had your tree that had a canopy that was 20 feet wide, then more or less you would try to center that canopy of the tree you were cutting directly in between the two trees you were falling into. The more you minimize the amount of hit, it reduces hang up, but it also reduces those limbs being bent back, breaking, and then throwing back towards the operator. So directional felling can decrease widowmakers and struck by situations by trying to reduce the pressures against the falling tree, against other object trees. So that's the concept. So how do you do that? Think about your plan, your leans, offsets, and utilize felling practices of directional felling with the lines on the saw, your face notch, your hinge. Control that tree to where you need to place it to reduce those struck by situations.
And so directional felling, if I'd aimed it more to the left, we wouldn't have had that limb damage, would we?